Several news organizations, including the Boston Globe, reported he was murdered in prison today by inmates associated with the mob.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at 10 killers who were murdered in prison.
Many saying that today, 30 years after he was sentenced, Donald Harvey was judged.
For this list, we're looking at convicted murderers who died at the hands of another inmate. Which of these stories do you find the most chilling? Let us know in the comments. Thor Nis Christiansen.
Thor Christiansen terrified a town.
No conscience whatsoever. Zero.
Born in Denmark, Thor Nis Christiansen was brought to the U.S. by his parents at the age of 5. Although a bright student in high school, Christiansen later lost interest in his studies and dropped out to work at a gas station. Around this time, he began harboring despicable thoughts, which he then made a reality after stealing a pistol from a friend. He was responsible for the deaths of 4 women, but his murderous spree came to an end when his intended 5th victim survived the ordeal and led the police to him months later.
This guy thinks what he did was all right.
While serving a life sentence at Folsom State Prison, Christiansen was wounded in the exercise yard by an unidentified prisoner and later succumbed to his injuries. Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega. Dubbed El Mataviejas, which translates to the old lady killer in English, Jose Antonio Rodriguez Vega rained terror on elderly women in Cantabria, an autonomous community in Spain. In the span of just 8 months, Rodriguez Vega wormed his way into the hearts and homes of several women in the area and took the lives of at least 16 of them. Upon his arrest, Rodriguez Vega confessed to the crimes, but later recanted his confession during his trial. Regardless, he was found guilty and sentenced to 440 years in prison. After serving only a fraction of his sentence, Rodriguez Vega met his end at the hands of 2 inmates at his prison in Salamanca, who brutally attacked him in the common area. Léopold Zion. The crimes of Léopold Zion are pretty tragic, not only because they involve the deaths of 4 people and the assault of many others, but because a large number of them could have been prevented. Zion had been convicted twice of crimes involving assault, but in both cases, he was released early by a parole board. He later succeeded in cutting short the lives of 4 young boys before he was arrested again, this time for good. Zion was convicted of just 1 murder and received the death penalty, although this was later commuted to a life sentence. He was attacked and killed in prison by a fellow inmate, who was acquitted of the crime on the basis of insanity. Leroy Martin. Born and raised in Gaffney, South Carolina, Leroy Martin lived a seemingly normal life. He worked in a textile mill and had a wife and 3 children. Behind that facade, though, was a maniac who rained terror on women in the area and was responsible for the deaths of 4 people.
And I was getting a little eerie feeling as we got deeper into the woods, and finally one of the deputies said, "Here she is," and she was covered up with some brush.
After placing 2 calls himself to a newspaper editor, Martin was spotted close to a crime scene by 2 local residents and was later arrested by police.
You tell the sheriff his boys better catch me real soon or I'm gonna take me another one.
Why don't you just turn yourself in?
Nah, y'all gonna have to hunt me down and shoot me dead like the dog I am.
He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, but only served about 4 years before he was put out of his misery by another inmate at the Central Correctional Institution in South Carolina.
Part of him wanted to be caught. I think another part of him enjoyed the publicity. He would get up every morning and go down to a local cafe and get copies of all the papers and read and talk about the strangler.
Charles Schmid.
National media pounced, including Playboy and Life magazine, all to see the man, the murderer, with a personality bigger than life.
The Pied Piper of Tucson, Charles Schmid was a serial killer who claimed the lives of 3 young ladies in the 1960s. Schmid was known for hanging out with a group of teenagers in the Tucson area, and when he wanted to know what taking a life would feel like, he sought his victims within that group.
It was May 31st, 1964, when Schmid decided to fulfill a long-time desire to see what it would feel like to kill.
In the end, it was one of those same friends who was instrumental in helping the police build a winning case against him.
Richie Bruns got probation and was sent to Ohio, so he was so jittery, he called his father and told him all about what he knew about Schmid and the deaths.
After successfully escaping from the Arizona State Prison in 1972, Schmid was recaptured and sent back, where he met his end just 3 years later in a horrific attack by 2 other inmates. James Whitey Bulger.
At the age of 14, Bulger had his first brush with the law. arrested, and setting up a lifetime of being on the wrong side of the law.
Once the most wanted fugitive in America, James Whitey Bulger was an infamous mob boss who controlled the Winter Hill Gang in Somerville, Massachusetts. He also worked as an FBI informant for many years, which, unsurprisingly, did not make him many friends among his criminal associates. Bulger lived as a fugitive for 17 years, but was finally arrested in 2011 and handed 2 consecutive life sentences for his notorious crimes, including murder.
Whitey Bulger was found guilty on 31 counts, including both racketeering charges, and was found to have been involved in 11 murders.
He bounced around multiple prisons before being sent to the United States Penitentiary in Hazleton, West Virginia on October 29, 2018. In less than 24 hours, Bulger was ambushed by several inmates and left for dead in an unrecognizable state.
Investigative reporter Eric Rasmussen found out Bulger is the 3rd prisoner killed at that facility just this year.
Donald Harvey. While working as a hospital orderly in Ohio and Kentucky, Donald Harvey was responsible for the deaths of a self-proclaimed 87 people.
He was quite bizarre, and on certain levels raised some doubts as to whether or not this guy was reciting some sort of fantasy.
Harvey employed several methods in what he deemed as a mercy killing of his patients, including the use of poisons, suffocation, and withholding essential medications.
They do narrow the list to 10 possible victims. All died of illnesses that could be a cover for poisons like arsenic, a substance found in large quantities at Harvey's apartment.
He pleaded guilty to 37 murders to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. But when you describe yourself as an angel of death, chances are you're bound to get a taste of your own medicine at some point. This came in the form of James Elliott, a fellow inmate at the Toledo Correctional Institution in Ohio, who descended upon Harvey, being familiar with his crimes.
He placed himself in that position. I really don't have much compassion for him. He's, I said back then, and I'd say today, if he ever had gotten out, he would have continued to kill people.
Richard Loeb.
I think that the murder said something to people about American society. This was seen as a culmination of trends that were dangerous, that were immoral.
Richard Loeb and Nathan Leopold were 2 extremely intelligent students born to wealthy parents and fantasized about committing the perfect murder.
Wealthy, well-educated teenagers who had done it, they said, for the sheer thrill.
They found their victim in the young Bobby Franks, who paid the ultimate price on May 21st, 1924. The 2 got rid of the body, but mistakenly dropped a pair of eyeglasses at the scene, which were traced back to Leopold.
They found that only 3 pairs of eyeglasses with that hinge had been sold in the Chicago district.
They managed to evade the death penalty and were sentenced to life imprisonment instead. But while Leopold maintained a stellar record through his sentence and was eventually granted parole in 1958, Loeb's story took a gruesome turn. He met his end at the hands of another prisoner at the Stateville Penitentiary in Illinois, who viciously attacked him in the shower. Albert DeSalvo.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated.
1960s Boston, Massachusetts was terrorized by 2 criminals. One dubbed the Boston Strangler, who killed 13 women, and the Green Man, who broke into women's homes and assaulted them.
The grisly headline-grabbing crimes had some comparing the Boston Strangler to Jack the Ripper.
As police launched an investigation into the Green Man's activities, they were pointed towards Albert DeSalvo, whom they arrested and charged with the crimes. While in custody, DeSalvo confessed to also being the Boston Strangler. But due to a lack of physical evidence, he was only tried for the Green Man allegations. DeSalvo was serving a life sentence when he died after being wounded by another inmate in the prison infirmary. Decades later, DNA evidence obtained from one of the victims would prove that DeSalvo was, in fact, the Boston Strangler.
It would appear to definitively determine, in fact, that Albert DeSalvo was the killer of Mary Sullivan.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for killing more than a dozen people. The majority of those murders happened in an apartment near the Marquette campus.
One of the most infamous serial killers to ever walk the earth, Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for the deaths of 17 young men. His spree came to an end in July 1991 when an intended victim escaped from Dahmer's apartment and led the police back to him. He pleaded guilty to all the charges leveled against him and received 15 consecutive life sentences in Wisconsin and an additional one in Ohio. In prison, Dahmer was reportedly unremorseful for his crimes, which reportedly infuriated his fellow inmate Christopher Scarver, resulting in an attack in the prison gym that left Dahmer dead.
To many, including Dahmer's own attorney, it comes as little surprise.
I wasn't shocked because I thought that Jeffrey Dahmer would end up this way.
Scarver also killed Jesse Anderson, another convicted murderer, who just happened to be in the gym at the same time.
At his first court appearance, Scarver entered the courtroom singing.
Rain or shine, sharing your dreams.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.